vibration to the situation. Add a new vibration.
All right, thrill seekers. That was a song called Fear of Flying, or a little bit of a song called Fear of Flying by Teenage Fan Club, and it's from their album 13, which I only recently found out by listening to a podcast called Bandsplain that most fans of Teenage Fan Club don't like. And I've always really liked it, and so did the host of the podcast, Bandsplain. So good on you, host of podcast Bandsplain. I think your name is Yasi. I always liked that album too, and I only found out recently that I'm not supposed to. So, but I still like it. Anyway, that's the song. I don't want to talk too much about the song, except to say that I really like it, and I think it's about life. That this is your one-way ticket, so don't F it up. Sounds to me that's about life. Anyway, I thought I would do a review of this book because I've been talking about it a lot, Emptiness and Omnipresence, ever since late last year, I found out, because I was looking back at some of my old postings and things. I've been reading this book for a long time, and that's going to be part of my review. So I finally finished it a few days ago. After starting it, good Lord, I think I started it last fall. So it took me a long time to get through this book. But I will say that, okay, first off, this is a positive review. So if Brooke Zipporin, who wrote the book, Brooke A. Zipporin, is watching this video, I like your book, and if his fans are watching it, I like Brooke's book, and so I'm giving it a positive thumbs up. That's my TLDR version of the review, so it's got 2 thumbs up from me as both Siskel and Ebert. And so anything else that I say about the book should come in context of the fact that I like the book and I recommend it. It is a book about Tendai Buddhism, or as he calls it, Tiantai Buddhism. Tendai Buddhism is a form of Buddhism that's part of Mahayana Buddhism. And the reason I was interested in learning more about Tendai Buddhism is what it's called in Japanese, and Tiantai Buddhism is what it's called in Chinese. So I tend to call it Tendai because it's easier for me to say Tendai. So Tendai Buddhism is the form of Buddhism that Dogen first studied. It apparently was a more popular form of Buddhism in Japan during probably most of his life, I would imagine, because Zen only became popularized basically by Dogen and his successors, as well as some other people. But anyway, Dogen and his successors, I think, were most influential in popularizing Zen in Japan. Probably. We could argue about that. But anyhow, so Tendai Buddhism was more popular, but it's a much more sort of heady intellectual form of Buddhism. It requires a lot more thinking to try to get it. And so when Dogen first decided to study Buddhism, Tendai was the form of Buddhism that he studied. So when he became a monk, at around the age of 12, he became a Tendai Buddhist monk. So he studied Tendai Buddhism from age 12 till gosh only knows when, because the biography is his biography, the things he wrote and the things other people wrote about him are a little vague about when he decided that Tendai wasn't for him and decided to study Zen. Probably in his late teens or maybe in his early 20s, he finally had enough Tendai Buddhism and decided that Buddhism was still something he wanted to learn about, but this Tendai stuff was just too much. And so he started studying Zen Buddhism. But upon reading this book, I started to understand that a lot of the way he interpreted Zen was probably pretty influenced by Tendai Buddhist thought. So the way I found this book is I got a bug up my butt, or I don't know if that's a real phrase. Somebody can tell me in the comments, or if I just made that up, to just study Tendai Buddhism. But I didn't want to get something that was just too difficult, because I I've tried to study these sort of more intellectual, heady forms of Buddhism before and just gotten way bogged down in them. I just couldn't follow what the hell I was reading. So I was trying to find out if there was a book that was kind of an easy introduction to Tendai Buddhism, and looked around the internets, and this seemed to be highly recommended by several people on the internets, and maybe even one or two of you out there might have hipped me to it. I don't remember, and if I'm slighting anybody by not remembering you, I'm sorry. I apologize. But anyway, so I ordered this book and I got it, and I think that Brooke Zipporin is an interesting writer. He's interesting to me because he writes a little bit like I do. He was born, I believe, around the same time as me. He's about the same age as me. So he might have had some of the same sort of formative influences. He is, for example, maybe the only Buddhist writer I know other than what's his name, Noah Levine, who references Johnny Rotten and punk rock in his writings, and he does it in more Zipporin, does it in more the style that I reference Johnny Rotten and punk rock than in the way Noah Levine does. So I'm wondering if Brooke Zipporin has read my books. I don't know. I'm not going to claim that I'm an influence on him. I don't know, but there's something similar in his style of writing to mine. So if you're into my style of writing, you might like his style of writing too. So there's a lot to like about this book, and one of the things I've done since I've been reading it is I've quoted it a lot. Like I have this Instagram page that I established for Ziggy, for my dog Ziggy, called Ziggy Zen Dog. So if you want to go subscribe to Ziggy Zen Dog on Instagram, what I do is I put up a picture of Ziggy, and then I find a nice Zen-y quote that I put under the picture. And I'm sorry if I'm bursting anybody's bubble. Ziggy does not usually pick the quotes. Usually I pick the quotes. Sometimes Ziggy picks a quote, but usually it's me. Anyway, I put the quotes, and sometimes I put quotes, or recently I put a couple of quotes that I found in this book, so I'll give you a couple of the ones I found from Brooke Zipporin, because he seems to be a source of good, pithy little quotes. Here's one. "It is this recognizing of ourselves in other lives that is the true meaning of rebirth." So he explains rebirth in a really interesting way, and that's one of the quotes I pulled out of there. And this one I think may have also come from the section on rebirth. I'm not sure. I didn't write down where it came from. But here's another quote I used in Ziggy Zen Dog. "To be someone is to be turning into someone else." I think I used that in Ziggy Zen Dog. I don't remember. Here's another quote I got from him that I think I used on Twitter as just a little quote I threw out there on Twitter. "It is always too soon to know how anything will turn out." Just like that. I don't remember where that turns up in the book, but I love that quote. Here's another one. This is him paraphrasing, I believe, some Tendai master's sort of summation of the Lotus Sutra, or a summation of one of the ideas of the Lotus Sutra. I believe that's what he's doing here with this quote. And so just a short quote, and here it is. "A moment of experience is the entire universe meeting with the entire universe." That's a nice one. And here's a quote I made up, but I made it up, I remember, inspired by something that Brooke Zipporin said. "All deception is self-deception." Now that I attribute to me, but it was influenced by something I'd read in this book. So all deception is self-deception. Nice one. Some other quotes I'd written down in the back of the book. Sometimes this is how I take notes in books. I've told people about this, and it's my little secret way of taking notes in books that doesn't ruin the book. I write them down on the back flap of the book, and then I note the pages that they're on. Well, so don't say you never learned anything from one of my videos, because other people now do this, I've noticed, because I've told them about it. Here's a quote he picks up from the Lotus Sutra. He may have rephrased this. "The body is a mirror whose aspect is made of the appearance of all worlds." Actually, I do know he paraphrased that, because I went and looked it up in the Lotus Sutra, and the Lotus Sutras actual quote is much longer. And when I looked it up, I had to agree with Brooke Zipperin that is what it says, but he made a very nice summation of it, because the Lotus Sutra takes about a paragraph and a half to say what Brooke Zipperin condensed into a single sentence very nicely. Here's another one. You are a past life memory of the Buddha. Here's another one. I don't know what this is. I just put it down. This comes from page 192. Everything I think is true can't be true. That's a nice one. And he talks a lot about that quote, Buddhas alone together with Buddhas, is how Nishijima Roshi, my teacher, always quoted it, and he always quotes it as only a Buddha and a Buddha, because plurals are different in Chinese and Japanese, so sometimes sentences can be read either plural or singular. Anyway, he does a lot of talk about that. On page 71 through 77, he talks about rebirth and relates it to Jerry Seinfeld, which I do a whole Seinfeld thing in Hardcore Zen, so that kind of reminded me of something I did. So that's a lot of the good stuff about the book. So there we go, 11 minutes of good stuff about the book. Here's the bad stuff about the book. The bad stuff about the book is he's a philosophy professor. What does it say he is? A professor of Chinese religion, philosophy, and comparative thought at the Divinity School of the University of Chicago. And he tends to write like a philosophy professor. So he uses those dreaded words ontology and epistemology, which I have mentioned on this YouTube channel, I think more than once. I can never read the words ontology or epistemology and remember what the hell they mean. And sometimes kind people explain them in the comments section when I bring it up on YouTube. And it doesn't matter how many times people explain to me what they mean or how many times I look them up. I can't fix in my head what either of those words mean. Every time I come across them, I have to look them up again. I don't know what ontology means. I don't know what epistemology means. Every single time, in however long I have studied philosophy, which has been since the early 80s, I cannot keep in mind what those words mean. And all the philosophy words, I cannot keep them straight. So when he starts talking philosophy words, I just go, my eyes glaze over. So one of the reasons it took me like 6 months to read this book, at least 6 months, is because I would read it and there'd be passages where I'm like, wow, this is great. I'm learning a lot. I'm getting these pithy quotes like I just read to you. There's some great stuff in here. I'm starting to understand why Dogen writes the way he does. Everything is great. And then I'll come across a 20-page section where I'm just going, what the hell is this about? I have no idea. Page. I have no idea what this page is about. I have no idea what this page is about. Page after page where I'm just like, I don't know what the hell is going on, which leads me to just putting the book aside. At one point, I put the book somewhere, forgot where I put it, started reading some other books, and that must have been sitting. It was actually sitting in a box over here in the other room. I found it. It must have been sitting there for 2 months, with me not knowing where it was and kind of not caring where it was for a lot of the time, because I had hit one of those passages where I didn't know what the hell I was reading anyway. So, and then after a while, I was like, I want to go try to finish that book, and it got better. The other thing he does that sort of annoyed me is there's a very interesting ideas that the Tendai Buddhists have about good and evil. And somebody apparently had challenged Professor Zipperin about this and asked, what about Hitler? Everybody does this, you know. And he wrote a neat essay, which is somewhere on the internet, and I usually promise to give you a link. I can't even promise to give you a link because I don't know where it is anymore. Maybe if you Google Zipperin and Hitler and Buddhism, Tendai Buddhism, it might come up. I don't know. But anyway, I read the essay, and it is up there somewhere on the internet. And I thought it was a really interesting reply to this guy who tried to challenge him about these weird ideas that Tendai has about good and evil. And And, what about Hitler? And he wrote this interesting essay. Well, he rewrote that essay. He rewrote that essay for the penultimate, the semi-final, the second to last chapter in English of this book. And for my money, he just ruined it. What was a good and interesting essay got turned into, I think maybe he was nervous. I mean, I do this too when I'm putting something together for a book that I used in another medium before, like a YouTube video or a blog, and I'm nervous about, oh my God, this is going to go out on a book, and I have to be very apologetic and walk on eggshells and be worried about how people are gonna respond to it. And it reads to me like a guy who's really, really worried about how people are going to respond to it and taking such great care, being worried about how people are going to respond to this Hitler stuff, to the point where he ends up not saying anything. So I'm just going, come on, get to the point, stop apologizing. And he just apologizes for the entire chapter and never gets to the point. At least that's my opinion. Whereas the essay, he actually does get to the point. So that's another thing. And I also felt after reading the book that I understood why Dogen ditched Tendai Buddhism and went to Zen. And the reason is kind of because of that stuff, because of what I was just saying. I don't think all that stuff where my eyes glazed over and I couldn't understand what was going on is really Professor Zipporin's fault. I think he explained the material as straightforwardly as anyone possibly could. I really think he did a good job of it. I think the problem lies in the material itself. The problem is, and this is the problem with a lot of Buddhism outside of Zen, is that Buddhism got way too intellectual for its own good. That is the problem that Zen stepped in and tried to remedy. So, and I think this is why Dogen was dissatisfied with the Tendai approach, because it's way too intellectual. There's no way you can understand it without doing a lot of mental gymnastics. I mean, that's a kind of phrase people use for it. It was painful to read some of this stuff, like mentally taxing to read this stuff. And again, I don't think that's Professor Zipporin's fault. It's the material itself that he's trying to explain requires so much brain work to try to understand that you're just exhausted, at least I was, by the time you're just spending trying to figure out what the hell is, these convolutions. Whereas Zen, I think, is much more straightforward. I know a lot of people read Dogen and go, this is straightforward, but believe me, Dogen is a lot more straightforward than anything you'll find in Tendai. Dogen is nice in terms of Zen. What Zen does is often it tries to reduce everything down to like a single sentence. And that confuses people because they're like, I don't know what this sentence means. Well, what Dogen tried to do is sort of expand those single sentence Zen explanations into longer pieces in the hopes that maybe those would be easier for people to understand. But sometimes those just make people go, I don't understand what this 10-page thing is about. But actually, I think the 10-page Dogen things are often easier to understand than the single sentences or single paragraph things that some other Zen people do. Anyway, that's something else. Anyway, so in short, go buy this book. It's good. Well, I don't know, maybe it's not for everybody, but it's a good, if you're interested in Tendai Buddhism, if you're interested in kind of exploring the roots of where Dogen came from, it's a good book. It's not for the faint of heart, though, because it is difficult. It kind of vacillates back and forth between easy passages, which are very straightforward and easy to understand, and I love them, and passages that are like, oh my God, I have no idea what's going on here. But, it'll go back and forth between those. So just if you do decide to pick it up, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get parts where it's easy and then parts where it just like, yeah. Maybe if you're a philosophy person, you won't have that same experience. Anyway, there you go. That's my review. I spent too long reviewing it. So I will just say that have a good time all the time. Anyway, here is my links. If you want to send me money to buy more books, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on your screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living. So I appreciate your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't have to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. I said that already. Bye.
Hey Ziggy, how you doing? You watching TV? Okay, I won't bother you. I'll let you watch TV. Bye.
Hey, I don't look back on all the things I've done. I've never looked for answers in a song. Ain't got no good ideas. I'm staring at the sun. Don't always look for comfort in a song. This is your one-way ticket, so don't fuck it up. Your flight is boarding and you're running out of luck. New vibration to the situation. Add a new vibration. I'd love to save the world like nature's only son. I've never looked for answers in a song. Don't have to paint no words, the thoughts that don't belong. Don't always look for comfort in a song. This is your one-way ticket, so don't fuck it up. Your flight is boarding and you're running out of luck. Add a new vibration to the situation. Add a new vibration. Add a new